Thank you for this introduction. First of all, I want to thank Nikita for inviting me. It's very nice of you. And Alexandra for all your work, organizing the travel details in the hotel. It's very good work as well. Okay, so I don't really know this audience very well, and I would like to present something that is interesting for you. So my idea is that I'm going to present broadly 3 of these cases that I've been working on, 3 ethnographies, and I'll give you, maybe you'll have a feeling that it's a little bit superficial, my explanation, because I want you to get some ideas, and then maybe in the discussion we can talk about them and you can ask more specific questions about what I'm talking about. So I already be aware that I'm going to talk about different topics in a very schematic way. I'm presenting a comparative analysis of 3 different cases. The first one is a TV set in Barcelona. Okay, so I stayed in a TV set for 3 months in 2006, and I took field notes and I interviewed the members of a production company because I wanted to understand how a crew works together. Okay, so how producers, directors, filmmakers, the technical staff work together and make something called a movie or a TV. Actually, it was more like a TV movie. My second case is in dance, and this is going to be the bulk of the presentation because it is the one that brought more interesting material. Okay, and the dance case happened in San Diego and also in London, in both geographical settings. This is the largest project. It started in 2009 and it's still ongoing. So every year there is a new dance rehearsal, a new dance project, and we're there. We capture the rehearsal and we analyze the data. And then the third case is in Barcelona as well, and this is the one that we're working on now as well, and it's synchronized swimming. So this is a different environment, right? Because it's not art anymore; it's more like a competition, okay, sports. But there's also an artistic aspect to it, and we are also starting to work in this new area. The tool that we use is ethnography as a method, and then as a digital tool we use Elan, which is a software that allows us to analyze video in a more efficient way. I'll talk about it in a while. All of these environments are very, I would say, messy, right? A lot of things happen at the same time when you're studying an artistic environment. It doesn't mean that it's more interesting than another environment. A factory can be interesting as well. But the fact that in the arts usually there's a lot of informal things happening, okay? A lot of gossip, a lot of ambiguous instructions, a lot of suggestions, a little bit like in science, yeah? Since there's all this informality, sometimes it's hard to understand what's happening. And we believe that ethnography is a good tool to understand this type of environment. Okay, that is less structured. Then finally, from the theoretical point of view, so we talked about method, we talked about ethnography and tools. Hi, how are you? Sorry. The other important element to talk about here is the theory. So in sociology, there's a lot that's been said about art, from Becker, from a lot of French sociologists. But there's this approach from cognitive science, which is called distributed cognition and embodied cognition, which we believe are useful to understand how artistic decision making takes place. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So one of the first, can somebody's like with the time? Me. Okay, so when it's 25 minutes past, can you tell me? Okay, thank you. So the first point that we explored is the idea that when we interview artists in all these different settings, okay, that's for all these different settings, there is this tendency of working with a myth, we call it occupational myth, which comes from Meyer, 1948, quoted by Merton, okay? This idea of the myth is that there's a lot of things that happen in art that are not taken into account, that are invisible in discourse. So when artists talk about their work, their own work, especially when they work with people, okay, because we're talking about dance and TV and film where people work with each other, there's a lot going on that is just invisible, not said. And this part that is not talked about, that is not explicit, is usually based on interactions and material aspects of the process. Think about science, same thing. If you studied theory of science, Latour and Woolgar, and all these authors, Norcetina, they talk about the laboratory and how there's a lot of things happening there that are part of the scientific kitchen and they're not out in the open. So this is an extract of an interview with one choreographer. And he's talking about how he relates to the dancers. Okay? So the question was, how do you think about the dancer? Okay? Who is the dancer for you when you work with the company? And the choreographer says, it's much more the kind of the material of the body. So it has something to do with tension, the articulation, the muscle, the matter of the body that I'm using. I imagine it's almost like being a sculptor and sculpting in clay. The material of the body is so plural in its material. You can see the muscularity to get this kind of very elastic body, but also you can use this kind of fragility to work with this kind of angularity. Yeah, I think of the body in terms of material, like that. So what's interesting in this example is that, is the type of adjectives, right, that the choreographer is using to describe the dancer, which, I'm sorry, I need to make it a little bit participatory because I'm not used to like talking and, okay, so I'll ask for some feedback. Which words do you see here that are interesting to qualify the dancer? Obviously, the dancer is a body, okay, and how is this body?
Very materialistic.
Muscles.
Physicality. Touchable, so to say.
Object for some activity.
Exactly.
Subject to some activity, I would.
Okay, good. So you see all these elements make for a very, let's say, material relation, yeah, a very tangible relation, yeah, a very objectifying relation, you could say, when he says that it's almost like being like a sculpture. Well, it's not exactly the same, right? Because he's working with bodies, not with a piece of clay. So in this sense, the relationship is very tangible. It's very material, yeah? But at the same time, it's very abstract, okay? Because when he talks about his own process of creation, the author of the process is the choreographer, yeah? So the author of the choreography is the choreographer, and the author of the whole piece is also the choreographer. And in that sense, the dancers for the choreographer are only tools for the whole rehearsal, yeah? So there's this kind of objectification in a way. So of course, why does it happen? Why is it like that? Why is it that we have this objectification process? Well, because all these elements, the material elements, the interactive elements, are usually not that important for art, right? Because what everybody knows that art is something that people do like that, like, you know, inspiration, producing something, art, right? This is like the dominant social discourse. So, another if you can help us looking into the mechanisms, the social mechanisms that happen during the process as it is, right? So our overall objective was always to find the dynamics of social distinction, and here we are talking about Pierre Bourdieu, that are at the heart of artistic decision making. And I would say scientific decision making, of course, and other environments. So the unit of analysis are experts' interactions, taking into account, and this is something from my PhD dissertation, that in a TV set, in a dance studio, in a film, everybody is an expert in their own domain, right? So a photographer, the director of photography is an expert in the domain of photography. The filmmaker is an expert in his domain of filmmaking. So we're talking about interactions between experts. And we look for, on the one hand, a vocabulary of tools and a vocabulary of processes. And I'll talk about this in a second. So methods. Can you see? Wait, I think I'm gonna just for a second, I'll write back. Just oh, the video. Okay, just for a minute. This is a TV set. Okay, so that's an image from the video from the Barcelona filming. This is an interview to one of the choreographers in San Diego. Okay, and you see that everyone is working as a team, and this is the TV set. The makeup artist is preparing the actors for the shoot. Okay. So the ethnographies are always made with video. They always include interviews, and one aspect to take into account is that we're working with teams that are kind of part of the social elite. Okay. Social elite from a cultural point of view, not necessarily. Basically, the people who are working in a TV production set in Barcelona don't have a lot of money necessarily. They don't have a lot of cultural capital either. But they do form a certain social elite if we take a broad definition of elite, as Aguiar and Schneider point out in a recent book about the fact of studying up. So we usually tend to study down. As sociologists, right, we tend to study the excluded, the marginal, the less favored. But it's a different experience to study up, in the sense of studying people who don't really need you there, they don't really want you there, and they're kind of suspicious about your presence because they think, what is it that what are you gonna, what are you obtaining from us? They're very aware of that. They're very aware of the information that you're taking from them. So that's an aspect that is interesting in this entrance process. The second, so you saw an image from the TV set. This is an image from the synchronized swimming team. So this is a duet, the main duet. I think they won the silver medal or the gold medal. I should know that. At the last Olympic Games. This is a duet. This is a trainer. There's been a big, that's another story, but there's been a big social event, problem with this trainer, and now he's not a trainer. There's a lot of gossip. This is an image of Elan, the software that we use to analyze the video. We'll get back to it later on, maybe, or actually no, but if you're interested in the discussion, we can talk about it in more detail. But it's a good tool to analyze and revise video. It doesn't do much work. I mean, it doesn't do work for the researcher. It's just an aid. And this is the third environment. This is the studio in London from this summer, from July, August, and September. The dancers were rehearsing Atomos, which it opened last October the 8th, at Sadler's Wells in London. And you can see that these names are Brown, Conning, and Graham are the names of the cameras, right? So there are 7 cameras. These are the direction of the cameras because we wanted to make sure that the whole area was covered. And you see the dancers and the choreographer. And actually, I'm going to show you now for a second so you can see. Just a tiny. So you see the choreographer, and now he's making on these 2 dancers. It's really interesting to just look at the video because there's a lot of things happening at the same time. But Okay, so in order to capture all this information, we took notes, all right? And we created a key, just like a map, okay, of codes that we wanted to look while we were observing. Sample codes. Codes would be like indicators for concepts. Okay? When I teach ethnography to undergrads, and I always tell them the difference between an indicator, an item, and a concept. So a concept is something abstract. Yeah, you cannot stumble upon habitus on the street, right? There's no habitus here. Okay, that's a concept. But then you need to find perceptual indicators of habitus, right? Such as, what would be a possible indicator of habitus in this room?
Bodily practices, for example, how we sit.
How you sit, great. Perfect,
Space.
because talking about body, how you sit. Exactly, that would be a good indicator. I like this, I mean.
I'm also teaching ethnography.
Okay, because this is not the most common answer. Good. Okay, so these are the list of, you would have, for example, in phenomena. No, not instructing. Instructing to a group, instructing to an individual, type of instructions, a make, a show, a task, structuring, practice. Okay, these would be examples of items that we could see, that we could code as type of instructions, for example. Okay, so our theoretical framework, as I said, spawns from sociology and cognitive science. So David Kirsch, the director of the dance project from UCSD, he's one of the creators of this concept of distributed cognition. I did my postdoc at UCSD, that's why I got into this project. And then cognitive research is, let's say it's similar to the concept of capital by Bourdieu, okay, but with more empirical content. So the idea is that capital is a very broad concept, and then cognitive research, when you talk about research, is about what you actually see people exchanging in the local setting. The general idea is that these concepts can be analyzed in these settings because they are intersubjective. So in art, in science, we work with a specific type of knowledge that is intersubjective. What does it mean that is intersubjective? Okay, so here I'm assuming, okay, that everybody knows something about sociology. I'm assuming this. Everybody assumes that we know something, that everybody here knows something about sociology. So everybody knows that everybody knows something about sociology, okay? But then we need the third step. Everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows. So we all know as a group, yeah, that we are here as sociology students or researchers or teachers or, okay? So these three steps, everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows, is what makes something intersubjective. So in the case of art, in the case of the TV set or dance, there is this shared knowledge, yeah? And we can talk about that for hours, like what's the difference between this type of knowledge and tacit knowledge and implicit knowledge, that's like full lecture, okay? And it also, and I don't want to talk about that here because I feel that it's like, that you will, I'm sure you know more about me, but it links very much with Bakhtin's dialogic approach, okay? All right, so we take this knowledge as intersubjective. And then we were trying to represent, I'll run out of time. We were trying to represent this knowledge, this intersubjective knowledge, and try to prove what I'm saying. So I'm taking this theoretical statement. I'm saying, yeah, artistic knowledge is intersubjective. How can I prove that from an empirical way? So one way of showing it, not proving it, but showing it, is trying to see if during the instructions that you just saw in the video, when Wayne, the choreographer, was instructing the duet, we would like to see if the dancers are just looking at Wayne, at the choreographer, and his assistant, Odette, and the dancers, of course, or if they're looking at each other as well. Because if they look at each other, if they ask each other, what happens? Well, it means that there's some information circulating there, Yeah, that is not only happening. That is not like I wanna show this to you. No, there's something else. People look at each other. They try to find information from other members of the group. Does it make sense? If it doesn't, yeah, sure? Okay. So how did we go about that? I won't get into it now. Again, if we are interested in this topic, we can talk about it in the discussion, or maybe in the conference if I can come back. But the idea is that in order to prove this distribution of knowledge, okay, two things must happen. Oh, sorry, and I'm using social network analysis. Small detail.
It's okay.
So there's two elements here into this kind of proof in a way. One is that if there's like information circulating, as I said, then it means that there's something else besides, one-to-one interaction between Wayne and the dancer. Yeah, that's one element, and this is a little bit what all this says. And then there's another element, which is if this information goes through certain patterns, certain dancers, it means that some dancers will be more important than others. Yeah, important meaning that they will appear in different social groups in this general group. All right, so we assume that these dancers will have more influence or more status or more prestige in the company. All right, so we asked 3 questions to the dancers. Who do you follow the most to create an information network? Who do you ask advice for? Who do you ask for advice when you get stuck? So, for like corrections, for example, or clarification, as we were saying. And then the third would be, with who do you feel more comfortable working with? This one is really important. This is the one that I like the most. Why? Because we tend to believe. Okay, so on the one hand, in informal settings, it's very important who you get along with. We all know that, right? And also in a sociology department, some people, you like more than others, and you tend to talk to these people more, and then you collaborate more with these people, and then you get to build projects with these people, yeah? And there's this friendship ties behind, okay. But I wanted to know if besides the friendship, besides the fact that I'll look to you more because I know you, I wanted to know if there was something else, yeah? Some kind of information reason, knowledge reason behind this relationship. Yes, so we created 2 types of networks for each of these questions. One is called the ego network. Ego network. The other one is a cognitive social structure network, CSS network. The first one is made by superimposing the individual answers of each dancer, okay? So the first row of each dancer. The second network, and this is the one that is more complicated, the cognitive social structure, is a projection. So we asked the dancers to imagine or guess which were the relationships that the other dancers had with each other. So for instance, I would ask Jess, so Agnes, what do you think? Who does she follow? Okay. What about Hannes? What about Paolo? So it's it's a projected structure. Okay. So I don't have time to go into this in detail. We can talk about it later. Okay, but here you can see the info networks, the cognitive social structure, the ego network. This is the advice network, the friends network. Okay, so the important thing here is that all the networks are different, and that's good. Okay, if they were not different, yeah, then we could say, okay, it's because they're friends and then they talk to each other. Right? That's the first point. Second point, when we use centrality measures, which is like the first measure people usually use to talk about social networks, closeness, degree, intermediation, we found that some dancers were more relevant than others. Okay, so some dancers had more ties, more relationships to each other in information, in advice, and in friendships. But they were not the same. The information and advice were similar, but the friends were different. Okay? And then in information, the key player here was Antoine. So in order to refine this measure, we used also something called Semelian tiles from Semel, and then something called N-cliques, groups of 2 or more. And we confirmed that effectively Antoine, the most expert dancer in the company, was the key of everything in a way. Yeah? Everybody looked at Antoine, everybody asked for advice, Antoine, but not necessarily, but he wasn't like the more liked dancer. Okay. We talked about that already. Okay, so in a way, the use of social networks makes interactions indicators of relations. Yeah? They're indicators or items of relations of trust or technical gossip, as Norsatina talks about. But the idea is that yes, there are these informal patterns, but they're not only friendship. There's also something else. There's like a functional cognitive reason for it. And that's why we talked about distributed cognition. In a way, it's saying that the dance couldn't happen. So if somebody says, okay, you cannot talk to each other, you cannot look at each other. Okay? Imagine the choreographer said, no, you have to only look at me, ask me questions, don't look at it. It's like the same in a class. Don't ask your friends, don't ask your colleagues. Just look at me and listen to me. What we say is that probably the output wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be as good. Okay, 5 minutes, thank you. Okay, that's an important point. So we moved another step, not a step further. We just looked at the same issue from another angle. We said, okay, what happens? So we took Semel's statement saying that the first indicator of reciprocity is gaze. Okay? So well, that's interesting. So we can look into that, and we can look into how dancers work with each other in duets or partnering. Okay? Where there's a lot of communication. And we discovered that one of the dancers, one day talking informally, she said, yeah, it's really important that dancers listen to each other. I was like, oh, interesting, listen. What do you mean by listening? Is it something verbal? Is it something that comes with gesture? And now we're looking into this kind of, the concept of listening and trying to see if it's mainly visual or if it's something else, or verbal, or what is it? What is listening in a duet? One possible answer is that listening is a type of distributed attention. In the same way we talked about distributed cognition before, okay? And now we're talking about distributed attention. So in an interaction such as the one in the duet, like focus interaction if you want, Goffman's, there's maybe some kind of pattern, like a conversation. You know, when in a conversation you talk to someone, you also look at this someone, you interact, you gesture. I gesture a lot, so people gesture less. But you move your body. There's a lot of things happening, multimodal things happening when you talk to someone. Well, then maybe in dance or any other artistic environment, it's also a little bit like that. Okay, maybe there is some conversation going on. So we looked into that, into modalities. Different types of modalities. And I'm going to the end now, here. And then we applied conversation analysis, and we can talk about that later as well, okay? For example, like Goodwin or Heath, okay, sociologist. Heath was in Torino in the conference. So we analyzed in dance and in synchronized swimming, so you can see here synchronized swimming, the interactions in duets. It is also a duet in a way, okay, in synchronized swimming. Conversation analysis is something very painstaking because you need a lot of time to transcribe. It's very detailed. I cannot tell you how much time I needed to do this in a way. It seems very ridiculous, but it's good because it gives you, again, what we were talking about at the beginning, evidence of material and material and communication patterns in this type of work. Okay, that's kind of the. So we transcribe an example of an interaction in a duet, and then we kind of pointed out elements of embodied turn-taking. So elements where where swimmers or dancers look at each other, move their body, not only from a verbal point of view. Okay, here you can see the dancer looks at the trainer reaches for the video camera and looks for the video snippet. The swimmers look at the screen. And here's a whole interaction where they actually don't talk to each other until here at the end. Okay, so the idea is that interaction is not only verbal but also embodied in different types of modalities, which makes this distribution of knowledge even more, if you want to say, invisible, right? Because if it's verbal, you can say, okay, they're talking. But if they're not talking but they're looking at each other, there's already information being exchanged, there's already interaction, but it's even more hard to pinpoint. Okay, so finally, all of this has the final point of all this is trying to define listening in dance, for instance, as a concept, as a sociological concept, yeah, as a type of skill. Remember at the beginning we talked about experts, interactions between experts? Well, the idea is that listening is a type of social skill as well, yeah, that is learned in a certain location based on distributed attention, distributed cognition. So yeah. Oh yeah, and then of course what is important and necessary always, because I don't want to have the feeling that we only work with video. It's always interesting and important to interview the people and to interview the participants and get information from them, which is something we always do. Okay, I think I'm done for now, and I'm really happy to have a discussion later about whatever you think is interesting from that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have the two discussions merged together in the
Yes,
end?
I have declared in the very beginning of our session. Yes. Very clearly, I hope.
Because the topics are very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very
It
different.
might make sense to discuss right after.
Maybe.
Do you really think
And a
so?
lot of questions, because here in Dafne's
It's micro and macro.
methodological points to discuss.
Oh, okay.
And we don't have that much of methodology.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, if everybody is
Happy with this.
happy with that, we can just start the discussion now. So the floor is open then. So we can
So I'm
now
staying.
not limit ourselves to the questions of clarification, but rather go deeper into the discussion.
Let's go deeper.
Yeah, let's go deeper.
So conceptual questions or methodological questions? Because I have both, and I'm not sure what to begin with.
Begin with something.
And also because it's hard sometimes to tell if it's
So
logical.
I think that someone in the conference at the European Sociological Association asked you this question, but it also came up in my mind because when you show an example of the quotation of the dancer, of the leading dancer, yes, talking about the others as sculptures, material, as a body, it is not a participatory approach, but I think that there are some participative practices in dancing, like as well as in artistic practices as such. When we listen to the publics, yes, in art, and when we listen to the dancers as in the dance room, for example. So how do you take this into consideration if it is not happening like top down?
Should I answer now or should I wait for a couple? Answer? Okay. Thank you. Yes, very good question. The first quote, you mean this one, right?
Yeah, the wrong one.
This one is from the choreographer.
Materiality.
Yeah.
Choreographer.
But of course, not all choreographers are as, let's say, I made this question to more than one choreographer, and some are definitely more participatory in the sense that you're saying. But then, of course, if the thing is, I don't know exactly the distribution of how many choreographers are one way or the other, but what I think is important is that the ones that use a more participatory approach, they take into account that what they're doing is intersubjective. It's like art, you know, like when you get approaches from neo-Kantian or participatory art, they come already from the intersubjective approach in art. They would never say, oh yeah, art is something that is just out there and the audience cannot say anything about it, but they would say, someone like Danto, for example, right? They would say, no, art is something that is constructed in a relation between the audience and the product. So the model, and you're right, there's two models, I don't know how many, but these two models compete in this course. And I guess I'm more interested in talking about the one that is more restrictive, just because I think that the more important ones are still in this, important in the sense of social success, are still in this model.
So they are still dominating like that.
Yeah, or like common knowledge, yeah. The idea that we have of artists as something like that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, there. Question there.
Thank you. So I have two questions. Thank you for a very interesting and very vivid presentation. And the first question is about the sequence of methods. So it is ethnography with, so four, as I counted, different methods: observation, interviews, conversation analysis, and video analysis. And what was the sequence of this procedure? Do you start from these ego nets and then you check them in video, or you start from video, and what was the match between what the experts told you and what have you seen during your observation and video? It is the first question, and the second question is about the comparisons. So the aim of comparisons can be very different, and in your case, you just replicate your methodics in different cases, or you compare them and looking for different causal relations as it is. So comparison could be applied for very different aims, and what was your aim?
Great, thank you. Because it's, I know that it was a lot, and it's my fault in a way of being a little bit messy, and it's really good that you asked me this question, because I think I didn't make clear that what I present are three different ethnographies. Ethnographies meaning that I observed and interviewed a certain setting, okay, for a certain amount of time. And then my object, and I agree with that, even if it's ethnography, I do believe that you need to construct theoretically your object before getting into the setting, okay, the social object. So my object is always the same in a way, is expert cognition. And I believe expert cognition, artistic cognition, is always based on interactive patterns, intersubjectivity, and material aspects, okay? So this is a social object. Ethnography would be the method. So for data gathering, used observation, both visual and note-taking, and interviews. And then data analysis would be where you would get social network analysis, conversation analysis, social interaction analysis, and the content discursive analysis that I presented with Ilan. Okay, so those are two different. Ilan would go. I don't know if it's. So Ilan, conversation analysis. When I say Ilan, I mean content. I mean in Spanish it's called discursive content analysis, but conversation analysis, and then here you would have the interviews and observation. Yeah? Is it more clear now a little?
Yeah,
And the sorry.
and how you match the results, so what these experts have told you about whom they communicate for different purposes. And for example, if you saw in your video and your observation that the real picture is maybe slightly different, or they do not say about something that you see in your during your observation, what was what were your conclusions? Yes.
Okay, so the first conclusion, I don't have a conclusion, but the first result that I presented, the one on social networks, it was like a surprise both for us and for them, because they never thought that there would be so much going on during the rehearsal. They thought that they were only looking at the choreographer and the assistant. So the main finding would be, yes, there's much more going on socially, interactively, during the rehearsal. That is not only instruction following. That would be, the idea is that it's not instruction following, you know. When the dancers and the choreographer and the TV set is working, they're working together, they're not following instructions, they're doing something else. That would be one thing. And then the other one, when we look at the conversation analysis, the type of modalities, is a little bit looking the same object from a different side, and trying to understand which are the elements that make this relationship. So first we said that there is an information exchange, and now we say, okay, so how is this communication going on? How is it? Is it embodied? Is it verbal? So that's, yeah.
But I think an important part of the question was how did you justify selection of these particular cases?
And that's something else, yeah.
Yeah, how
the selection of cases.
Selected these particular cases for some reason, and
yeah,
what?
Good. The initial pattern was, so I first selected the TV set because my initial work was an ethnography of a TV setting. Okay, then from here, I compared that with something very different, which is a medical team, a hospital team between doctors and nurses.
A very nice paper.
Well, that's very, very far. So these had a problem justifying why I was comparing both, okay? But you can see why. It was the idea of expert knowledge in one place and another. So we started with the TV set. Then, for methodological reasons, this professor called me to go to the dance project because I had this expertise on visual ethnography in a different setting. So he said, oh, so you studied arts in TV, so maybe you can now go and study dance. So it was a methodological link. And then from there, but always carrying this object. The object doesn't change, it's always expert cognition. And then from dance, the jump to synchronized swimming was because I had one student. Actually, one of the two girls in the team was in my class. And she was the one that had the idea. She said, oh, but maybe what you're saying about dance would be useful for synchronized swimming. So that's the link.
So there's no single strategy behind all these different cases?
No, you know, like the snowball. You know the snowball technique in qualitative? So it's a little bit like that. But not really, but kind of. Yes.
You have this piece of information of how the expert works with the dancer, and in this field of working with the dancer, he focuses on the dancer like on an instrument. And do you have information about how the dancer works with that focusing, how he defines himself while working with the expert?
Yes, actually, in this same analysis, there's examples of how the dancer, for example, says, yeah, I'm working in this way because the choreographer wants me to do so. Okay? For example, they have to write down what they've been doing in a notebook. And they say, I would never do that. I would never write it down because I remember in other ways. And then they explain which other ways. But I'm using the notebook because this is what the choreographer wants me to do, and it's fine. But I'm changing the way I'm using my body and the way I'm creating. And they say things like, when I create for myself, I do it in a completely different way. Or I move my body in a different way. Or I memorize in a different way. So that I have. Alternative ways of being an expert, in a way. Is that what you meant, a little bit, or?
Maybe, but while working with the expert, the dancer cancels his own picture of doing that thing.
Oh, you mean, okay, wait. So you mean if he talks about what he's doing, well, you know, the thing is, when you interview dancers and choreographers from the same company, the choreographer is very powerful. So you get the choreographer's name is always there. And of course, and it makes sense, he's the boss, right? So you won't get something like, oh no, yeah, I don't like how Wayne does it because I do it better. Doesn't make sense, because in this kind of context, the authority, that's something else that we explored as well, the authorship, the legitimacy is the choreographers. And it doesn't, imagine you're saying, yeah, I'm in this class, I'm doing a PhD, and I have this PhD advisor. You need to believe in this PhD advisor, otherwise it wouldn't be your PhD advisor, right? So a little bit like that. Since the authority of the choreographer is not only power but authority, it's you know, they believe in this authority. So no, I didn't get that much complaints in a way. If it is, but they do have a conscious of how they're working. Yeah, they say they follow.
And in terms of networks, the choreographers, the most central ones, or are there any dancers that are also like the central figures, but like non-formal leaders?
Is she there in the networks?
Yeah, well, very good question. It's interesting because, nobody asked, but you're asking in an indirect way. So what I showed, okay, let me show it again. That's interesting. This one here. The center is Antoine. He's the informal, he's the expert dancer. So this is already an informal network. Mm-hmm. But this network is like that because we saw that the first choice, it was always the choreographer and the assistant. So we took them out of the network.
Okay.
Otherwise they would be extremely central.
Exactly.
Guys, not
okay.
the dancer.
It's in the paper. I didn't
understand, but you know, when there are other central ones, so
exactly.
It's interesting to compare the degrees of centrality. For example, it's non-comparable because
they were all there.
100.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We took them out but we asked. So first we asked, and we proved that they were all there, and they were all like blah blah blah. Okay, so we took them out.
And about if it's about this thing, then
connected to.
Okay, I have just like another question about the network.
Mm-hmm.
So these three types of networks.
Mm-hmm.
Some we have friends with, some we are friends with, some we follow and ask for advice. But I'm at an investigation. Well, in fact, when we when we listened to the lecture of Nashir, he mentioned this, that there is a phenomena, lovable fools and competent jerks. So that we love, we like people, we like our friends, and in fact we seek, we go to ask for information from them, and we ask for advice from them, and if we don't like people, we just don't touch them. But here you have another situation.
Yeah, which I'm very happy about, because that was my first idea. I had the idea of technical gossip, you know, Norsetina. It's very important to meet with people and talk, and then I mean, it's not an opposite result, really. It's not that it's not in this direction. It just says that it's not only like that. It's not saying that you don't talk to friends. It just says that they're not exactly the same. Yeah, it's not like a contrary result.
Does it depend on the scale of the group? Because these are the network or not? How many
11.
people are there?
Pretty small. They're pretty small. I mean, I cannot really go beyond. I mean, my educated guess is that it's because there is an expert. It's a level of expertise. Because it's really, really the guy, Antoine, he's the most, the one that has been in the company for a longer time. He's like the one that has the clear, sharpest style, close to what Wayne wants, the choreographer wants. So there's a lot of good reasons for that.
Okay, for
I
very
think
long.
it's also about that each performance, but
No, because actually there was a question trying to be formulated very, very long ago. But if your question is very much related to what is discussed now,
I almost
And then
forgot
let
it
us-
now.
sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just give the floor to Yuri first? And
Yeah,
then,
sure.
Because actually, sorry,
Yeah.
I came a bit late, so my question actually has a general character. I would like to know much about your vision of your object of research and
Alright.
how you can integrate into general framework of sociology. Because I'm very interested in this issue of, I call it not ethnography of dancing, but maybe a kind of sociology of dance or sociology of ballet. Because in Petersburg, I'm very interested in this issue. I have a personal interest in this subject because I'm very interested in the historical and social role of ballet as social institution within the urban context of Petersburg particularly, and Leningrad as well, as a kind of ideological institution as well. So my question will be, how do you see this subject in sociological terms? How it relates to the question of society, social setting or social origins, and maybe a kind of role of researcher, expert, or as an observer? Because maybe I can give just as a background of my question, my own experience. I attended, it was open a new, very important Academy of Ballet of Boris Eifman. He is actually classical, representative of classical tradition of Russian ballet, but at the same time he tried to introduce elements of modern dance. So and during this special cultural event, I attended the opening of this ballet academy, and interestingly enough, of course, it was a list of attendees. So and I identify myself as a kind of researcher, scientist with interest in cultural sociology. I formulated so. So, and I was it was allowed me to attend a general discussion. It was very interesting because Tsiskaridze, this famous ballet dancer, attended, and so discussion was open to me. But after it was a master class of famous American choreographer, this woman, master class of modern dance. But this was denied to me. Because they said, you are not artist, you are not, why you have to attend this? Because это для специалистов, only, typical.
This is for experts, they said.
Yeah.
Exactly
For
as in your
experts only.
introduction.
So it was really, but I said, I'm very interested to see how it is. No, discourse you can follow, because I can formulate what is this
But not the
problem,
actual thing.
tradition, and modernity, how it is formulated in discursive terms, but not to see how it is practiced directly. So my question, because that is
Yeah,
the
very
question,
interesting.
because I'm interested not so in technical terms, but I'm interested in ballet in the cities. I said, okay, discourse, but practice not. So my question therefore is, how do you define your object in more general sociological terms, as a part of society, or only conversational analysis?
Okay. Well, I think I'll answer the question, but I think what you said was very interesting, and I can totally relate to your experience, because a year ago they had a general workshop with members of the company of Wayne McGregor, with other choreographers, with scientists from psychology mainly, but also sociologists and neurologists. And it was supposed to be a dialogue between all of them. But actually, it really wasn't. Because it was, as we said, it's like these fields, right, everyone? And ones were saying everything is this way and it comes from the gut and it's intuitive. And then the other ones were saying, not me, but psychologists, like very hard behavior is saying, no, but you can study it and you can find routines. And of course, they were like that. So there's definitely this defensive aspect that comes with a scientist getting into art. So yes, it happens all the time. And also a matter of status, as you said, because usually it's... as for the object of study, let's see. I don't look into the broad aspect, what do you call sociological? I mean, I think this is sociological as well, but it's about talking, defining tiny sociological objects, such as knowledge, yeah? And for example, I'll give you an example of something that I think you would find interesting in that scale. We wrote a paper on marking, which is something that the dancers do when they practice. They don't move all the time. They do something smaller, small movements, which are easier for them, and it helps them learn. So this is kind of a hidden curriculum, something that is not official, it's invisible, but it's there. So in that sense, I think this is sociological, because it's making explicit something that is not taking into account, right? It's something that it's a competence, a skill that they're not supposed to do. So in the sense of defining skill, I think it's very sociological. In the sense of traditions, for example, you can also see a lot of conflict between classical ballet, neoclassical ballet, contemporary ballet, what's music and dance. So we looked a little bit into that, into the dialogue between musicians and dancers, and how in some traditions there's a very strong opposition, and in some other traditions there's a good relationship. So issues about style. That's okay.
Okay, Nikita, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I have a lot of questions, but I think the most important would be among them to ask with regard to these networks. As far as I understand, you found that they are present, that they are there.
Mm-hmm.
You analyze how these relationships emerge and what is constituted parts of these relationships between the actors. But have you tried to consider, I don't know, I mean, as you have the network structures, it would, a normal idea would be to think about what are the structural properties of these networks, or how do they evolve, or how do different configurations of these networks influence the group creative process or knowledge creation in the groups and stuff like that. Have you tried to consider those issues, or are you planning to do that?
I would need more networks then. For the evolution, for example, I would need to interview them again, for example, now and see if it has changed, for example, right? I've thought about it, but I mean, I could replicate, but the problem is, in part, that this company changes. I mean, the members change all the time. So half of the members are not there anymore. They changed. I mean, maybe it doesn't really matter, because I could get a pattern, but I don't think I could compare it. I wouldn't be able to see the evolution, I think. I'm not sure. And then the structure, what do you mean by structural analysis, such as what? Because I've done centrality, cliques, and yeah, of course. The first measure I applied is centrality measures. So the degree, betweenness, and closeness.
Okay, it was so fast.
I know, because I was really fast. That's how I got.
About that? Okay.
Well, that's how I got. So the fact that the key figure is Antoine comes because he's the first in degree, the first in betweenness, but not so different from the rest, and the first in closeness in all the networks except for friendship. And then from the homogeneity and point of view, you get that they're very spread out. Okay, so it's like it's not really, yeah, so that's for centrality. And then I didn't even put it here. In terms of closeness, I use the eigenfactor, which is like local, and everything confirms. I mean, I didn't give you that, but everything confirms what I said, more or less.
So is he also central in eigenvector?
Yeah.
Or?
He's also, yeah, except for advice, where the second is Hannes. So there's like a pair. There is Antoine and Hannes. And he appears also interesting.
Have you tried to consider dice strength as well? Because with a material like that, you can easily do that. I mean, not easily, but very interesting. If you analyze how they interact.
But they're symmetrical. So I only have, is there a relationship? There's no relationship. I don't have a direction.
How did you trace their relations? I mean, if they mention, if they're named.
Exactly, but I made it symmetrical. I didn't make it directional to simplify the measures.
I mean, maybe an idea.
Yeah, no, that's good. Maybe for the paper.
Since you observe, maybe for the next paper.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's very good.
The particular interactions, say you do the discourse analysis or conversation analysis or that, or anything.
Yes.
So you can differentiate between relations of different actors in the network?
Yeah, you mean observing. You mean observe, yeah, I know. That would be great, but I don't know if it's going to be possible, because it's really hard to see, to look at who looks at who in a certain point.
Didn't you do this? I mean...
No, that's a questionnaire. So everything comes from the questionnaire.
Do you relate your networks to their bodily practices, for example? Yes.
What do you mean?
For example, you mentioned that... let it be an example.
Yeah.
Antoine.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like this and this in networks, but you have got information about that people look at him more. They somehow relate to him bodily. Yes. You do this interaction analysis, you do conversation analysis, so do you relate these things?
I don't. You know why? I don't, because this is a paper from 2011, and what I'm doing now is with a company where Antoine is not there anymore. So I would need to, do it again and see, in order to make it more, I could do it again and then I could relate it to. But for example, let's say that I can write the conclusions of this paper thanks to what you're saying. Since I was there and I could see and I knew who Antoine was, I can say that Antoine was an expert and that he did this and that. So it gave me contextual information to interpret the data, but I didn't push further. And it could be done, but I think I need more data for that. I should do it again.
Yeah, because it will be perfect.
No, but it's true. It would give
a question about these real networks and imaginary networks.
Mm-hmm.
How are they different? And
that's a big question.
Do we have some hypothesis for this? Why they are different, or they are not different?
Well, that would take a while. Well, no, but
field of research.
Let's see. Yeah, it's really important, because the first network, and that's why I say it, because I think it's really important to take into account that raw ego networks is a real network. So it's really an addition of the individual answers of each dancer. It's real in the sense that they answered, and I believe what they said about themselves. Okay. But the second one is a construct. It's made with this. That's why I put this picture of this is how you make it. You use this CSS function from UCNet, and then what it does, it adds up all these imagined answers of the dancers. So of course, I don't know, the difference is huge. They have nothing, nothing to do with each other, no. But one is a representation of what happens, like a survey. And the second one is a projection. So now we can talk about that. What is a projection? And then we need to get into cognitive representations and about why do I think is interesting? Why did I do it? Well, because they're not the same. Okay, so in order to prove that they were not exactly the same, and I think that's interesting because then it means that these networks are not totally intentional. It's not that they're not totally planned, and people are not absolutely aware of what's happening. And I think that's good because this means that there's emergent cognition and distributed cognition going around. So that's the idea. Yeah? If they would be the same, then again, it would be less interesting. Yeah? I know we can talk more about it. In relation to your research, maybe. Are you going to present something now related to that?
Unfortunately not like networks or something like that.
Well, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, I saw a question there.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the net again. I'd like to ask you, did you take in account two factors, like the time and the type of the dance for that group? Because in my opinion, I was a dancer and I know that the kind of dance is really important because if it is very touchable, it makes one picture. If it is not very touchable, I mean the body contact, it gives another picture. So, for example, the new dance hip hop is not very touchable and not very interactionable. And the main thing that this dance is very different. Every time you make another dance, it looks very different from another dance, on the next dance.
And then you get less or more? You get less interaction or more interaction?
No, I think that the interaction may be the same, but the result of the net will be completely different. For example, when I dance that time, I will see to that girl. But the next time I will watch the other guy.
Oh, okay. You mean it changes more? It's more random.
It changes.
It's more random and more improvisational.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. More improve. Okay. Okay.
And this is again for the time when we dance with each other for 1 year. That there is one leader. So in a year there will be another leader, or maybe there will be 3 leaders, and so.
Well, that's why the second part. Thank you for the question. That's why I was saying before that I'm not using the data for now, because I do believe that time makes things change, and since Antoine is not there anymore, I'm sure the whole network changed. So yes, time matters. I did the interview, this questionnaire went around when the dancers had been together for at least a year. All of them had been in the company for at least a year, and many of them, many more. Okay, so, but it was already a stable group, and they were together for at least 1 more year. So in that sense, I consider that that it was a sample of a structured group. As for the improvisation part, what you saw in the video, okay? So Wayne has 3 different types of instructions, we want to call it. And what you saw was Wayne making on a duet. So he takes 2 dancers and he makes on them. He gives directions. He moves them. He talks. And then the other 4 or 5 duets, the dancers pair up. Sometimes they choose to pair up, sometimes Wayne chooses to pair them up, and then they follow what the reference duet is doing. Yeah? This is the structure. So again, it's pretty structured because it's Wayne saying something and the others following what he's saying. So there's no improvisation in that sense. There's no improvisation, but there is, because this information structure proves that there is small, and when you talk to them, there are small elements of improvisation. They would say, yeah, I'm trying to, the grip is really hard, so I'm just pretending to do this, and then later on when I know it better, I'll just do it better. So there's a lot of improvisation from this technical point of view.
So can we say that if we have the factor like time,
Yeah?
that these nets are very dynamic?
I don't know, again. I mean, it would be really interesting to look into it. Well, it depends. It's very interesting. It depends on your interpretation. So if I follow my interpretation and say, well, I think it depends on the expertise of the dancer, I would say that they're stable until the point that this dancer disappears, or another dancer appears that has more influence for another reason, for a status or more expertise. Let's say that Antoine disappears and then a new dancer that is a really good ballet dancer, actually this happened. Now there's another dancer, Alvaro, from Albania, the Italian, and he's a really good ballet dancer. He's like the best ballet, the one with the best ballet technique. He's not the best dancer, but he's the one with the better ballet. So it means that he has a very high status because he's really good in technical stuff. So probably if I did this this network now, he would be maybe close to the center.
Do you remember
Maybe.
the centrality of Antoine or centralization of the whole network? At least degree or any of the centralities, approximately.
Do I know it?
Yeah, do you remember the number?
No.
Of the centrality of
No, and I had the
centralization of whole
paper
network?
and I didn't bring it. I have it here in St. Petersburg, but not here. But I can tell you.
It's like, I mean...
I don't remember. I know that I remember the number of relations. It's like we had 6 relations in advice, 6 in trans, and 8 in information. And I would say, I don't want to say a number because I'm not sure,
Okay, let's check.
but we can look it up.
Because I wonder if they need to be centralized to an extent like that. I mean,
It's interesting.
would this pattern repeat across different networks when Antoine goes away?
Well,
Would they
I
have
think so. Yeah,
to
I
have
think.
someone like that.
Yeah. Well, that would be the great, exactly, to prove the point.
In addition to
Exactly.
the
That's really good.
Director, what's
So you make me. Okay. I'll do it again.
you have to.
But you know, exactly. I was gonna say it's not me. It's someone told me to do so. But you know, I'm just a little bit wary about doing it because it's a small company after all, and I did it once, and it was already a little bit disruptive. And I don't know if I do it again. People talk, and dancers are very, very, very gossipy, and I don't know. Sometimes it's like the.
Different cases.
Yeah, I could do it. Yeah, I could do that. For example, the listening thing, the listening interview, it's been really problematic because when I ask the dancers about, do you think you're a good listener? Do you think your partner is a good listener? They take it personally and they make comments. Oh, but why? Because somebody told you that I'm not a good listener, and so
like
it's
suspicious, right?
Yes, right
So
away.
my question was
Yeah.
related exactly to that, because we were conducting interviews in artistic groups.
Uh-huh.
There were generally very rarely problems with having access to the field. However, sometimes there were problems with people not being able to be very reflective about what they are doing. And probably in the dance and swimming it's even more difficult because so much is connected with bodily practices and so much is connected with routinized ways of doing things. So do you really think, how would you tackle this problem in the interviews? Have you ever faced the problem? Well, clearly you had observations as addition, but still.
Yeah, very good question. And I think that we were very lucky because this company is very special in the sense that it's not like the Royal Ballet. If you go to the Royal Ballet in London, they're very good ballet dancers, but they don't have a very strong body awareness because they're really used to following, they have to exactly do this. And probably, I'm sure they do more, but initially, as you said, the verbal discourse probably would be more restricted. But in this company, the choreographer is someone who wants them to think outside the box in a way, and he forces them to talk about their process. And actually, the project started with a collaboration between Professor David Kirsch and McGregor. So in that sense, we had a problem actually at the beginning. They didn't talk. The dancers didn't talk, and we put one in the middle of a room with 3 cameras, and we said, okay, we want you to move because we said instead of talking, just move. You don't have to talk. But they didn't move. They were like sitting, like we're tired. It's like it's 5 o'clock. We've been dancing all day. We don't want to move. So then what we did, in order to overcome a little bit this initial drama, is we paired them up in twos. And then it was like easier for them because there were two of them and they could talk to each other and they could, build up a little bit of strength and joke about things, and then they talked more. So we did this kind of double interviews.
Okay, other questions, guys? A comment? You have a comment? Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. It was a very interesting presentation. Exactly, it is connected with my question, because to my knowledge, this sociology, so-called sociology ballet, is more about discursive construction of ballet, a social role of ballet and dancers within the society, within the urban society, some kind of ideologization or politicization of ballet in particular
Context.
which was very typical for history of Soviet ballet. And maybe the question of this public and audience, like this ballet cliques, which was very important in Leningrad society in the 70s as a form of this culture consumption. But you offered completely new perspective because it's so fantastic but so hard to do. So without how to say expert knowledge to conduct such a research, you need to be a dancer because otherwise it will be very difficult to identify this. So fantastic, and maybe it is really not some kind of or micro sociology. It appears so.
There's related to what you're saying about the role of ballet as a cultural or political construct, I've read very good papers in France about ballet and, for example, the role of, a lot on gender and also a lot on discourse. So the fact that dance wasn't notated until late, in a way. So the fight for dance knowledge as something that it was, abstract and as abstract as music, in a way, right? As powerful or as knowledgeable. So that's something that it's, I think, what's her name? Marie Glon. She made her PhD dissertation is on that. So in the sense, it's not exactly political, but it's like the weight of dance in the cultural field, in a way.
And did you take into account the problem of this marketization and market relationship within this field? Because in Petersburg, but for your analysis, it's important. This market role of marketization, monetization.
Yeah, you know what I would like to do, talking about networks? I would like to, but it's really hard for me to do that. I would like to make the network more macro network of the different agents that get into play, because it's a market, right? So you have the company, but then the company and all these it's like in films, the producers and the theaters. There's a theater market, and the Wayne McGregor's company is the resident company of Sadler's Wells, which make it, you were saying about ballet in the Soviet times. In London, this is like a very commercial, it's avant-garde but commercial dance. So obviously there's more alternative dance in London, but it's not getting all the attention. So it's one of the 3 or 4, I think one of the dancers, Fukiko, she was in a Atoms for Peace video by Radiohead, and she won an MTV award. So we talk about mainstream cultural products here. So, right, of course, it can be approached from this point of view.